Ethan Cole had grown up with the smell of fresh hay, the sound of horses breathing in the early morning, and the endless stretch of open land that reached all the way to the horizon. He was a cowboy in every sense of the word, hardworking, quiet, and deeply connected to the land. Every day started before the sun came up. He saddled his horse, checked the fences, worked with the cattle, and came home when the stars filled the sky. His life was simple, honest, and strong. But in that quiet life, there was always a space in his heart that waited for someone special. He had watched other men in town find wives. Some married girls from the city who didn't last long on the ranch. Others married women who shared their work but not their dreams. Ethan didn't want just anyone. He wanted someone kind and gentle, someone who could make a small house feel warm and full of life. More than anything, he wanted someone who understood loyalty and love the way he did. Someone who would build a future beside him, not run from it. Ethan had never been the type to flirt or chase. He wasn't good with fancy words, and most people in town called him the quiet cowboy. But behind that calm face was a heart that felt deeply. He believed in old-fashioned love, the kind that grew slowly like the wheat in the fields. So when he first saw Lena Moore at the Sunday church gathering, something inside him paused. She wasn't loud like the other girls, and she didn't dress to catch attention. She stood beside her father in a light blue dress, holding her hands gently in front of her. There was something soft in her eyes, not weakness but a calm strength that made him look twice. For weeks he noticed her in small ways. She helped older women carry baskets after the service. She read books while waiting at the bus stop. She smiled shyly when someone spoke to her. She was not the kind of girl who tried to be noticed, but Ethan noticed her anyway. He didn't talk to her at first. He just watched from a distance, feeling something he hadn't felt before. Hope. And hope was a powerful thing for a man who had spent years with only the wind and the animals for company. One evening, after finishing his work early, Ethan decided to go into town. His boots left dusty prints on the wooden floor of the small diner. He wasn't sure why he went there that day, but when he saw Lena sitting by the window with a book and a cup of tea, everything made sense. He walked slowly, trying to calm the sudden beating of his heart. She looked up and their eyes met. She smiled, a soft, shy smile, but it was enough to make him feel like the world had shifted just a little. He tipped his hat politely. "Evening," he said softly. "Evening," she replied. The conversation that followed wasn't perfect. Ethan stumbled over some of his words. Lena giggled a little when he said something clumsy, but not in a mean way. She had a laugh that sounded like the soft ringing of small bells. It made him feel at ease. They talked about small things, the weather, books, and the flowers near her house. But under those small talks, something warm began to grow. Over the next few weeks, Ethan found excuses to see her again. Sometimes he brought her flowers from the fields. Sometimes he walked her home after church. Every time they spoke, it felt natural. She didn't try to impress him, and he didn't try to pretend to be someone he wasn't. Lena had grown up in the same small town. Her life had been quiet too, though in a different way. She lived with her father, a kind man who spent his days fixing old machines. Her mother had passed away when she was young, so Lena had learned to be strong early. She spent her days helping around the house, reading books about the world, and dreaming of a love that was gentle and steady. She had turned down a few proposals from young men, who only saw her as someone quiet and easy to control. She wanted a partner, not a cage. When she met Ethan, something felt different. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his words carried weight. He looked at her like she was not just another face in town. He listened to her stories, and even when there was silence between them, it didn't feel heavy. It felt comfortable. As months passed, the two of them began to walk together in the evenings. They didn't need big promises. A simple walk under the stars was enough. People in town began to whisper about them, in a friendly way. "Ethan's finally found someone," they would say. Lena would blush when she heard it. Ethan would just smile shyly and go back to his work. One warm spring evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold, Ethan finally gathered the courage to ask Lena the question that had been sitting in his heart. They were standing near the edge of his ranch, watching the horses run in the fading light. "Lena," he said slowly, "I'm not good with fancy talk, but I've never wanted anything more clear in my life. I want you to be my wife." Lena's heart beat fast. She had dreamed of love but never expected it to feel like this. Quiet, steady, and real. She nodded softly, tears forming in her eyes. "Yes, Ethan," she whispered. Their engagement was simple. No big parties, no loud music. Just family, a few friends, and the wide sky above them. Ethan built a small white house near the barn, a place where he imagined a warm fire in the winter and the smell of bread baking in the kitchen. Lena helped plan the wedding with care, not for the fancy details, but for the meaning behind it. In town, people said it was the perfect match. A gentle woman and a quiet cowboy. No one knew exactly what they talked about when they were alone, but everyone could see it in their eyes. The kind of love that grows in silence. Ethan had always imagined his wedding night as something magical. He thought it would be natural, like everything would just fall into place because it was meant to be. He believed in old stories where the man always knew what to do, where everything was easy and smooth. He had built up that picture in his head over the years without ever talking about it to anyone. Lena, however, had her own thoughts. She was shy, yes, but she was also thoughtful. She knew that love was more than what people whispered about. It was not just about a moment. It was about trust, kindness, and learning together. She had read many books about love and life. She knew that even the softest love takes courage. The wedding day came with clear skies. The guests wore their best clothes and the sound of laughter filled the air. Ethan stood tall in his black suit, his heart beating faster with every step Lena took toward him. She wore a simple white dress that moved softly with the wind. Her hair was tied back with a small ribbon, and her eyes shone with quiet happiness. When she reached him, Ethan's hands trembled slightly. She placed her hand in his and the world around them disappeared. The vows were simple and true, promises to stand by each other, to care, to build a life together no matter how simple or hard it might be. After the ceremony, they walked hand in hand back to the small house on the ranch. The stars were bright and the soft sound of crickets filled the air. Lena felt nervous but calm at the same time. She trusted him. She knew this night wasn't about proving anything. It was about sharing a beginning. Ethan felt a mixture of joy and pressure. For years he had imagined this moment as perfect, but now that it was real, his heart was beating faster than it ever had during a storm or a long ride. It wasn't fear of Lena. It was the weight of everything he had imagined crashing into the truth of the moment. Lena, sensing his quiet, held his hand a little tighter. She didn't say much. She just looked at him, her eyes calm and steady, letting him know that they were in this together. And for the first time, Ethan began to understand something he had never truly thought about before. Love is not about perfect moments. It's about shared ones. That night wasn't about being strong or leading. It was about trust, about two people stepping into something new together. Ethan didn't know it yet, but Lena would soon teach him something he had never expected to learn. That love doesn't need a script. It only needs two hearts willing to meet in the middle. The small house on the ranch felt different that night. The wooden floor still creaked, and the soft wind still touched the windows, but everything seemed warmer, quieter, and deeper. Ethan and Lena stood inside their new home, surrounded by the scent of fresh flowers from the wedding. The lantern light cast soft golden shadows on the walls, making the space feel safe and calm. Ethan had waited for this night for a long time. In his mind, it had always looked like something from a storybook, simple and perfect. He thought he would be strong, sure of every step, and that everything would just happen like it was meant to. But now that the moment was real, his hands felt a little cold and his chest felt tight. Lena noticed the quiet between them. She wasn't surprised. She had felt the same mix of nervousness and excitement. But unlike Ethan, she wasn't holding on to a picture in her mind of how everything should be. She just wanted the night to be real, honest and kind. She walked closer to him, her white dress brushing softly against the floor. She reached out and took his hand. His fingers were warm from the day's sun, but his grip was tense. She looked up at him with her calm, steady eyes. "It's okay," she whispered softly. Ethan blinked, surprised at how gentle her voice felt. It was like a warm breeze after a long ride. For a man who had spent most of his life with horses and fences, words like hers could melt even the strongest nerves. He let out a small, shaky laugh. "I don't know why I'm so nervous," he admitted quietly. "I've faced storms. I've handled wild horses. But this—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't have to. She understood. Lena squeezed his hand gently. You don't have to be perfect, Ethan. We don't have to rush anything. We just have to be us. Those words landed softly in his heart. All his life, Ethan had believed he needed to always be the strong one, the one who led. But here, standing in front of Lena, he realized he didn't need to carry everything alone. She wasn't looking for a hero. She was standing beside him as an equal. They sat down together on the small wooden bench by the window. Outside, the stars were bright, shining over the open fields. The sound of crickets and the distant movement of horses filled the night. Ethan had always loved quiet nights like this, but tonight, the quiet carried something new. He looked at Lena, really looked at her, not as the soft, shy girl he had imagined in his dreams, but as a woman with courage in her heart. She was calm but not fragile, gentle but not weak. Her hands, though soft, held his like someone who knew exactly where she stood. "You know," Ethan said slowly, "I thought I was supposed to lead everything tonight. I thought that's what men do." Lena smiled softly. "You don't have to lead alone. We can walk together." Her voice was simple, but her words were powerful. They reached a place in Ethan's heart that had never been touched before. He had always carried the idea that love meant being the strong one. But maybe love wasn't about strength the way he had imagined. Maybe it was about trust. She began to talk, not with heavy or serious words, but with small, kind sentences that made everything feel easier. She told him how she felt safe with him, how she wasn't expecting a perfect night, only a true one, how love for her was about learning together, not performing a story. As she spoke, Ethan's tight chest slowly began to ease. His nervousness began to melt away like ice under sunlight. He realized that he didn't have to pretend to know everything. He didn't have to act like the world was a script he had to follow. Lena moved a little closer, resting her head lightly on his shoulder. Ethan felt her heartbeat against his arm, steady and calm. It reminded him of the steady rhythm of the horses when they ran together, strong and real. For a long time they sat like that, saying nothing. And yet everything was being said in silence. It was the kind of silence that felt safe, like a warm blanket on a cold night. When Ethan finally spoke again, his voice was softer. "I thought this night would be different," he admitted. "But I think it's better this way." Lena smiled and lifted her head to look at him. "Better is when it's real," she said. He looked at her, and something inside him shifted. For years he had pictured love as a strong hand holding a gentle one, but now he saw something different. Two hands holding each other, equal, steady, unafraid to be real. They stood and walked slowly through their new home, laughing softly about little things. The slightly crooked picture frame on the wall, the way the wind made the door creak, the tiny lantern that flickered now and then. It was simple, but every second felt alive. Ethan took off his old cowboy hat and placed it on the table. It wasn't just a hat. It was a piece of the life he had always known. And in that small, quiet gesture, he was letting go of the image he thought he had to be. He wasn't just a cowboy tonight. He was a man learning what love truly meant. Lena noticed his eyes soften. She reached out and touched his cheek gently, her fingers light like a feather. He didn't step back. He didn't hide behind his silence. He simply breathed in the moment, letting her presence fill the room. In the soft light of the lantern, they began to talk about their dreams. Ethan spoke of building a bigger barn someday, of planting flowers around the house. Lena spoke of growing a small garden, of waking up to the sound of birds singing outside the window. They shared hopes not like strangers making plans, but like two souls building a shared tomorrow. Ethan was surprised at how easy it felt. All the pressure he had carried for this night slowly disappeared. The more they talked, the more he realized that love wasn't something that had to be perfect. It was something that had to be honest. The night grew deeper and the stars outside seemed to shine brighter. Ethan and Lena finally moved toward the small room they had prepared together. The window was slightly open, letting in the cool night breeze. The sound of the wind in the fields filled the space with a soft song. Ethan paused for a moment, his hand on the door frame. He turned to Lena and whispered, "Thank you for not expecting me to be perfect." Lena shook her head gently. "I never wanted perfect, Ethan. I just wanted you." Those simple words wrapped around his heart like a warm blanket. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he had to be the strongest person in the room. He could just be himself, and that was enough. They stepped into the room together, not as a cowboy and a shy bride, not as someone leading and someone following, but as two people walking into the unknown side by side. The rest of the night was not about big gestures or grand words. It was about soft laughter, shared warmth, and gentle trust. Lena guided him when he froze, not with force but with kindness. She showed him that love didn't need to be like the stories in his head. It could be soft, patient, and real. Ethan listened, learned, and opened his heart in ways he didn't even know he could. Every small moment felt like a step toward a new chapter, not perfect but true. When the sun finally rose, soft light filled the room. The fields outside glowed with a golden hue, and the horses grazed quietly near the fence. Ethan lay awake for a moment, listening to the gentle breathing of Lena beside him. He turned his head slightly to look at her. She was still, peaceful, her hair spread softly across the pillow. In that quiet moment, Ethan realized that the night had changed something inside him forever. He hadn't been the one to lead. He hadn't been the one to control everything. Instead, he had learned how to trust, how to let go of the weight he had carried for so long. Lena hadn't just been his bride that night. She had been his teacher, in the softest and kindest way possible. The cowboy who once believed love had to follow a rule book now understood something far more beautiful. Love is not about knowing everything. It's about learning together. He gently reached for her hand and held it. It was a quiet promise, one that didn't need to be spoken aloud. It said, "We will face everything together. We will learn, grow, and build something real." Outside, the day was beginning. The ranch was waiting. But for Ethan, something far more important had already started. A new chapter, not of perfection, but of real, honest love. And in that simple morning light, Ethan smiled. Not the shy smile he once gave at the diner. Not the uncertain smile of a nervous groom. But the soft, steady smile of a man who had finally learned that the truest kind of love begins when two hearts choose to meet each other halfway.